But in 1982, there was a real attack on public education. Reflecting back, Governor Winter, could you kind of relate that time to now and the importance of getting the public engaged in those issues and how to do that? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Go ahead, Governor.
Want me to start out on that? Y'all have heard enough from me already. I want listen to Andy and Lloyd here. Let me simply say this. First of all, let me thank all of you who are involved in the hard process of promoting education by doing it every day and improving the quality of it and ensuring that we have a more productive and more enlightened citizenry in this state. And we have come a long way, and as David has just said, it was a lot rougher, a lot tougher back then in the 80s than it is now. As difficult as it seems to be now to get education to the top of the agenda, it was at the bottom of the agenda then. In 1980, when I became governor, we had just come through 10 years of the transforming of the system in Mississippi from a totally segregated system to a theoretically integrated system. Morale was low. Many communities were thinking about just in effect abandoning public education. And so we had to pump some life back into the system of public education. But that was a long time ago, over 30 years now. And yet we still have so far to go. The issue now, it seems to me, is that of being willing to make additional investments in our system of education. We developed a mindset in this state and in this country to some extent that we're not going to raise taxes for any reason. We all know that we are not making enough investment in public education. And that's one of the issues that all of us, I think, confronted with in the constitutional amendment that's being proposed for voting on in November. We have to free the legislature. Let me put it this: we have to free the legislature to feel that they can afford to increase revenue that will ensure that we move up on the scale of quality of our education. As has been pointed out in that film. Much as we've done, we're still last or next to last in so many indices, and most importantly and most alarmingly, we are still last or dead last in the amount that we are investing per pupil in their education. We will never catch up if we simply stay where we are relative to the other states. We have got to do more than they are doing, and that's what is at issue. And that's where all of us have to present a united front. Those of us who profess to be interested in public education, we have to present a united front without getting divided on a lot of the nuances that come up about whether we are for this aspect of education or not. We have to present a united front in defending public education, in funding public education, and in seeing to it that we have additional processes of education. Pre-K has to be a priority now. And so pre-K has to be a priority, and the second priority is not the second priority, it's on the same level. We have got to reward those in teaching. We have got to reward our teachers on the basis of their value to society. And we're not doing that until we move the teaching profession up on the scale of what is important in career rewards. We still have a long way to go. those are the challenges that face us now, and they, to some extent, the same one that faced us 35 years ago. But I think now we do have a greater understanding that the future of this state is more involved now in having quality education. We at one time thought we could get by with a less than well-educated workforce. We know we can't do that now. So that's where we are, and that's where we have to go, and this is no time to sit back on our laurels.
Thank you, Governor. Andy, you, of course, were involved in a lot of the on-the-ground organizing during this effort in '82. You're still on the ground organizing with teachers and principals and the education front. How do you, reflecting back and looking at now, how do you see things?
Well, one of the things that's so frustrating to me is the teacher bashing that's in vogue now with so many politicians, to blame teachers for all of society's ills, when it's just the opposite. Teachers are out there trying to help improve the problems of society. And it gets so frustrating to hear these politicians constantly bash teachers. We're getting ready to have, we already are in the midst of probably the worst teacher shortage crisis in math than we've ever had. The math teachers are just not there. And I'm telling you, as long as we bash teachers and blame them for society's problems and don't give them good pay and good benefits and recognize them, the teacher shortage is going to be worse than just in math. But I'm telling you, there are many schools right now that have Algebra 1 on their agenda this morning, but Algebra 1 is simply not being taught because there's not a teacher available who can teach Algebra 1. So that is very frustrating to me, and we've just got to fight it. And one difference with the politicians, the policymakers that I've noticed, that was a tough crowd we worked with back in '82. But many of them had respect for the system, how the legislature worked. And once you beat them on something, then you could rely on them to make what you passed work. And I'll give you, for instance, Buddy Newman, the speaker. After kindergarten was passed, it was passed separately. It was not included in the other 12 grades. So it sat out there by itself, which was dangerous in that the appropriation for it was separate from the appropriation for the other 12 grades. Now, I stayed and worked with 3 state superintendents, so I was involved on both the early stages of the Reform Act, but also the implementation of it. So it was dangerous that kindergarten was by itself from a funding angle. So I went to Buddy Newman, who was still the speaker, and I explained it. He said, I'll take care of that. He supported kindergarten from the rest of his time. When we wanted to make other little tweaks to various programs in the Reform Act, Buddy Newman was one of our best allies. I could always count on Speaker Newman to do what was right on education reform, because many of the legislators who had voted against it kind of thought, well, this is our piece of legislation. You could see a pride in it. And so the difference I see today is many of these who are from the Tea Party crowd primarily, they won't compromise. Once you beat them, they try to undermine you even though you've beaten them on your programs. And that's the difference in that old, tough crowd we dealt with and the crowd that many of us are having to deal with today.
Thank you. Lloyd, of course, was in the media during that time, as I was, and watching the communities developed, and actually it still surprised me. I was like Fred. I didn't think it would pass. I didn't think it could happen. You saw that actual bright and shining moment when it did, and how the state came together to do that. Tell us about the communication part, what you see in communities now, working in Tupelo, a strong area of public education. What do you see about the public perception of education now and that role in communication?
Well, one thing that struck me again in seeing the film and in remembering from my personal observation of Governor Winter and his team in that time building up to the Education Reform Act was repetition and relentlessness. In looking back at some of the stuff I had written during that period and afterward, you know, there was this sense, David, you'll remember, David and I were in the Capitol Press Corps at the time, that Governor Winter he was so fixated on this education thing that, you know, he might be overdoing it. But he knew exactly what he was doing, and his staff knew exactly what he was doing, because you have to repeat something over and over and over again before the public, or certainly a lot of people, begin to hear it and pick up on it. And I'll bring that up to this current day. It boggles my mind the number of, I consider, well-informed, engaged people who have no idea about what Initiative 42 is and what all the complications around it involve and what the legislature has done in response. I mean, people that I consider to be pro-education, that I consider to be well-informed. Now tell me about that. Now what is that, and what's it going to do? And so the idea that you can put something out once or twice, or issue a statement or issue a paper or do this or that and have it set in the public's mind is just not true. And even in this day of the bombardment of information, and maybe that's part of it, you know, the information is so much more decentralized today than it was back then. You had the Clarion Ledger beating the drum. You had other newspapers in the state, the Sun Herald, which I was working for at that time, the Daily Journal in Tupelo, and a lot of other newspapers around the state. But they were essentially the information media of the day, and it was easier to focus the public conversation, I think, in that respect. And we learned in the newspapers, too, editorially, that you had to say the same thing over and over and over again before people started to listen. But I think this idea of repetition and relentlessness, as Governor Winter demonstrated throughout his career on a number of levels, but ultimately in the passage of this legislation, is something we can't forget today. And, you know, I've heard people say about Initiative 42, well, this is our last chance. You know, if this goes down, it's over. You know, that's it for public education in Mississippi. Now, I'm not saying that there's not an urgency involved in Initiative 42, but we can't have the attitude that if it loses, because the deck is stacked so incredibly against Initiative 42 because of what the legislature has done to confuse the issue, then, you know, if we say, well, that's it, and we give up, you know, we'll be dishonoring people like Governor Winter, who said, no, I'm not going to accept that. I'm going to come back, I'm going to fight harder, I'm going to stay with it, and I'm going to keep going. So by all means, Initiative 42 is an urgent and important matter, but if it fails, that's not the end. It can't be the end.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'll just throw this out. What throughout the theme of the film and throughout the history of our state, leadership has been the big issue, and we see how important it is on education. But leadership's not always just in the governor's office. What can local school officials, local superintendents, teachers, what's the leadership lesson here for them? How can you be an education leader in your community?
Andy, you want to shoot that?
Well, another thing that's frustrating to me is I talk to teachers and principals, and, you know, they say we're being bashed and we're being blamed for all this. And I said, well, who's doing it? Who's blaming you? Well, the politicians, the legislature, and so forth. Well, we've got an election coming up. The candidates in your area, are they the ones you're going to vote for? Are they the ones bashing you, or are they for education? Well, I don't think so much, but they are a good Republican, good Democrat, my next door neighbor. I don't want to vote for somebody who can't win. Well, then quit complaining about them bashing you. If you're going to keep electing them and keep voting for them, they don't ever get the message. You know, as you saw in that film, as David Cruz said, you know, they can say no all the time to us, but they can't say no to their constituents. So if education is your top priority, then don't vote for a legislator or anybody who's running for public office that doesn't have education as their top priority.
Andy, can I say something?
Sure.
One thing that Governor Winter, one of the many things he did was he elevated education to a consensus priority for everybody in word, if not in deed. Everybody today will say education is my priority. Everybody will say we need a good education system. I support public education. There are very few people who would not say that who are running for the legislature. But the key is, what have they done and what will they do? And look at their records and ask them point blank, will you support full funding of MAEP? Will you support whatever it is that you are concerned about? Ask them to be specific. Don't let them give you, the runaround. And that's one of the problems today that we have that is a result of progress. That, okay, everybody thinks I've got to say education is important, but when it gets down to how they vote or how they're going to vote on an issue, that's another thing.
And you have to help hold up the hands of these legislators who are seeing all kinds of cynical, sinister pressures. Look what happened up in DeSoto County. Some of the best supporters that we have for public education in a county that really appreciates public education were defeated by, I think, outside, even out of the state influences, by pouring a lot